Good evening, Simon here, Explosive Action. I am back for another Death and Black Metal CD update. Got 6 bangers to take a look at, so let's get into it. So the first 3 CDs we're going to take a look at here all came from the same person on Discogs. You know what it's like, you find one thing, you check out what else they've got, you end up having a cart full. That's what happened here. So I'm going to pick 3 of those to show. The first one here is from 2006. It is the debut album from a Mexican 4-piece. This is Infinitum Obscura. The album is called Internal Dark Force, and it's Mexican. It's death metal, mid-2000s. Yeah, look, unsurprisingly, there's a whole bunch of the chasm-sounding metal of death in this album. And that's a good thing. It's really like that Mexican sound. There's so many bands with that. Obviously, the Chasm, Shub Niggurath would be another band that has that sound. Serpent's Aeon, of course. They all have that. It's gritty but has a melodic edge. These guys, absolutely no different. The vocalist and guitarist Roberto Lizarraga, I think is how you say his name, even played live bass with the Chasm at some point. So, you know, there is always a relation to the Chasm when you're in one of these bands in Mexico. There is quite a bit of the Sumberlane I found in the sound for this one as well, which is also, again, unsurprising. When I was reading about this, John Nodovite of Dissection apparently picked Infinitum Obscura to play support for Dissection's final but then cancelled tour in America. So look, the Chasm, bit of Dissection, that's kind of the sound you get here. It's very dark, it's very cosmic, suffers only mildly from a fairly average production, that's got to be said. When it gets to the faster sort of drum passages, the blasts get a little bit buried in the mix. It doesn't particularly detract. It's still a really solid, enjoyable listen, and it did apparently get reissued and remastered. So this edition is from Utterly Somber Creations, which is a great name for a record label, but in 2016 apparently was remastered. Maybe that's cleaned up some of those issues, I'm not too sure, I've not heard it, but this is it's a fine album as it is, and as I said, it's that metal of death sound, the Chasm sound with a bit more of a melodic black metal tinge to it as well, and that's what you get with these guys, their debut album. There's the band in there. They did 2 more full lengths, one in 2009, which I do have, and it is slightly better production, I think, and 2014, which I've not heard. Band is still active. Don't know if they've got anything more coming up, but yeah, Infinitum Obscura, good stuff. Next up, we're going to continue that connection to the Chasm. Why not? Because they're such a good band anyway. This is Ancient Gods, Mystic Lands. A short-lived act from 2001, features drummer Antonio Leon of the Chasm playing in this band, and also the now Shub Niggurath vocalist Carlos Lopez, back in 2001 though, before he was in that band. Look, again, it's that Chasm sound, that Mexican sound, but it is way more blackened in this, way more blackened than the Chasm sound. Lots of fast trem guitar, peppery drums that get into ferocious blasts, even raspier vocal style. I'd say just a touch of early Gothenburg Swedish sound. So think like Skydancer era, Dark Tranquility, bit of that in here as well, because it's that Mexican sound. There's always melody in that sound. They don't just bludgeon, they've always got great riffs with good melodies in them. It's only 4 tracks, as you can see here, but there's a lot stuffed into it. It goes for 21 minutes, just an EP. And just to complete that Mexican circle yet again, Ancient Gods' only other release was a split EP with Infinitum Obscura. So, look, needless to say, this and the other band, both were highly recommended. There's the guys in there. It's a real shame, particularly, I think Ancient Gods is, with only 4 tracks, I've played it about 8 times already since I picked it up. It's a real shame that there's not much more. I'm going to have to get that split EP with 2 bands, but full length would have been really good. But anyway, here we are, Ancient Gods, Mystic Lands. Fantastic EP. Next up we have Creon with Impact Winter, very green cover. Hopefully you can see that one there. This is another one and done album, another one and done band. Germany's Creon with their only full-length Impact Winter here, from 2009. These guys played a very, very non-German sounding, highly American sounding, brutal technical death metal. Think that period, mid-2000s to late 2000s. Blistering speeds, alternating with double kick, chunky grooves, a very tightly strung snare that gets a bit of a ping, heavy as balls bass, and just an immense bottom end. Like, this is very well produced. Deep sort of like Domination era Dave Vincent vocals, Morbid Angel, some kind of like rasps and things every now and then. The whole thing really is akin to something like later Deeds of Flesh, or probably even more accurately Malta's Beheaded. If you like those bands, I think you're going to like what Creon are doing here. United guttural kind of band. So there's just that real chunky heaviness, but there's also that technicality that comes with stuff on that label. There's a nice inside shot there. The guitars, they kind of stand out for me on this one. It's a little bit different to those bands. Just a bit like it's got more of an angular riff style. I think the lead guitar, when it starts going off, like, it's stuff that when I was last listening to it just earlier today, I was thinking, when have I heard stuff like this? And I thought, this is kind of like Alf Svensson, like early sort of at the gates, just that weird kind of stuff. Also a bit of like, Gorguts Obscura, those riffs that just don't feel like they make sense but make perfect sense. That's in here, but it's that core sort of Deeds of Flesh Beheaded sound. So yeah, really quite interesting, I thought, with this album Impact Winter from Creon. It has plenty of the things, as I said, that you would expect from this style, like those Morbid Angel sort of swirling riffs, all that kind of good stuff is here. But this was a solid one. This was that one that I chucked in at the end of the cart, just going, oh, this looks good, throw it in there. And it was like $4. So if you see Creon Impact Winter for a couple of bucks, I'd say pick it up. Next one up is a US band. They have a brand new album out now, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about their first album. This is Nothingness, The Hollow Gaze of Death. I thought I'd check this one out. It was just good timing. I knew about the new album. Distro had this one for sale cheap, so thought I'd give it a go. And okay, let's get into it. It starts with like a short little guitar intro, melodic kind of thing. On the opening track called A Cycle Unending, but then when those first riffs kick in, I instantly made that face. You know this one? That was me. The second that the riffs kicked in, it was, oh my god, just disgusting. Absolute meaty, putrid, pounding chug coming out of this thing. Oh, it steamed roll me in the face. This packs the same kind of punch that for me was like the old Eternal Suffering album, Drowned in Tragedy from a long time ago. The first time I heard that, and the first time it got to the first track and that breakdown, you know the one I'm talking about, I made that face. And that's the one I'm making here again, my god. For modern comparisons, I'd say something more like Malignant Altar, but with more Suffocation, New York kind of chugs in there. But also, this is interesting, it seems to get more prevalent as the album goes on. There's sort of like a hardcore, and I don't know enough about this stuff to really use the right terms, but that beat down kind of thing. I got some of that in here more than once. Like that it's doing the riffs and then it just stops and then the cymbal goes ching, 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 and everyone's just getting ready to destroy in the pit. There's a bunch of that happens in here. But look, it's still death metal and it's not deathcore, that's for sure. It's just bludgeoning. It is absolutely destructive. I was kind of surprised at how heavy this thing is. And that Eternal Suffering album, I mean, that's always been one of my benchmarks for just like pure groove brutality, and it's got that in here. I found myself air drumming involuntary when the moshy type sections would come up in this thing. It's even got some sort of like crushing death doom moments, like the tail end of the track on here called what is it, Wickedness in Purity. You know, it gets into just your more death doom crunchy sound. There's quite a lot of different things going on here, to be honest. The track Adorned with the Crown of Contempt, that one starts off almost like a slow black metal song, like dissonant riffs, rasped vocals. I wasn't expecting that. And then that track goes into like sludge. So they're kind of all over the spectrum here, but what stays constant the whole time is just crushing. Absolutely crushing. The final track, Timeless Menace, is essentially just one long breakdown. That's what it sounded like to me. This is a heavy album. And look, I don't want to say death metal or anything like that. It really isn't. Take a look inside. I haven't done that with the other ones. Lyrics and things. Band logo. It's just bloody heavy. That's what this is. It is incredibly heavy, and it does full gamut of sub-styles to be heavy. Nothingness. The Hollow Gaze of Death. And now I've got to check out the new album. Next one I'm going to show, I have to give thanks to Jeff of Medicant Media YouTube channel. After watching my last CD update, where I mentioned that I was needing one album from this band to complete the discography, he hit me up and we organised a very reasonable trade. I am talking about Dimmak with Intercepting Fist, the last one that I needed. This is their second album after the very, very strange Enter the Dragon debut. This one is a few years later. And also the last one with their original drummer, who is also ex-Ripping Corpse member Brandon Thomas. So at this point, you've got 3 members of Ripping Corpse doing this band. They really don't sound very Ripping Corpse. So if you're thinking it's going to be that, if you've never heard Dimmak, look, it's not. We're kind of like 2002 at this point. You know, think of the music that was being made at that time. It's pretty much sort of like Cryptopsy and Then You'll Beg, like that kind of thing. Sean Kelly from Ripping Corpse, he's still unmistakably playing his style of guitar. Like, it's just an evolution though in how he's playing it in Dimmak. It's approaching that sound that is on Knives of Ice, the album that I talked about in the last metal update. But the drumming on this, because it's a different drummer, it's kind of look, it has a little bit of a hardcore tinge to it this time. This album, like all their albums are death metal, but this one has the most, I don't know, if you're thinking of a band like Damaged and they use the term hatecore, which never made sense, but it was a way to distinguish themselves from grindcore and death metal. Is Dimmak doing a hatecore kind of thing here? Definitely in the vocals. There's a lot of similarities to Damaged in the vocals this time round. I don't know. That just occurred to me. So look, it is death metal, but it's just got a different sound to it, and it was a very much 2000s sound. John Longstreth of Origin came on and did the drumming from Knives of Ice and the Emergence of Reptilian Altars, their final album, and that gave it way more of that technical death metal sound because Origin. But you know, and the vocals in this one, like I said, it's got that sort of hatecore kind of thing going on because they're very barked, tough guy sounding vocals. And the band did get stamped apparently in the press as being a bit of a metalcore kind of thing. Look, I can hear it a little bit, particularly in those vocals, but look, it's death metal. This is a death metal CD. It's just not what you're expecting a death metal CD to really sound like. A little bit of that Wicked Innocence kind of thing going on in here. Just, you know, Dimmak kind of in that world as well. But, you know, it's still got that Hate Eternal style Eric Rutan guitar leads. Like, it's death metal. It's just a bit different. You know, the riff on the closing track on this one, Essence of the Northern Fist, I think that's the one. Or maybe it's the bonus track to the Negative Power. I wasn't paying attention at the time. The final track on here, it's got like a full swampy Morbid Angel riff. So, look, it is death metal. And look, here we are. I now have all 4 albums. How do I rank them? For me, it's a band that got better with each album. So, it's their second album. therefore it's my second least favourite. I still think Emergence of Reptilian Altars, their fourth one, is my favourite. Knives of Ice is now a close second, with Intercepting Fist being a third. But it is still a banger of an album. It's just that kind of weird, dry, technical, a little bit hardcore, all over the shop death metal. It's fast, it's rarely slow. Rarely slow. It's mainly hitting the speed, and yeah, quite furious, and something you kind of got to digest a few times. So yeah, Dimac, Intercepting the Fist, good stuff. Last album we're going to take a look at here is a brand new album, is only just out. It is the new one from And Oceans. This is As in Gardens, So in Tombs. Brand new. I got it only a few days ago, middle of last week, and I've only been able to play it about 3 times so far. But it is an incredibly new album out on Seasons of Mist. If you don't know And Oceans, or if you forgot about And Oceans, they reformed in 2019. They spent a decade rebranded as this thing called Havoc Unit, which focused on the industrial sounds that the And Oceans had kind of changed in their sound to before they broke up. So there was an album, their third album, called Am God. That album got a little bit cybery because it was that time. It was like early 2000s. Their follow-up was called Cypher. Pretty much just an industrial metal album. It kind of jettisoned anything black metal. Then the band changed the name to Havoc Unit, and well, that was the end of And Oceans. They came back in 2020 with a surprisingly good album called Cosmic World Mother, which did jettison most of that industrial sound and bring back the black metal. They didn't go back to their roots exactly, rather they found a third option, which was to take the style of the first 2 albums, some of the electronics from the third album, ignore that 4th album, and then make it a lot heavier. Production-wise, speed-wise, they got heavier. And it's a bit like Samael when they took that U-turn on their sort of twinkly space metal, doubled down the heaviness and released that album called Above. I reckon And Oceans can be compared to that with their last album, and particularly this new one, As in Gardens, So in Tombs. So now in 2023 we have their 6th album, and to my ears it's even better than the 5th. So the opening track, Ambivalent God, and indeed most of this album, actually sounds like something from Dimmu Borgir's Spiritual Black Dimensions or Puritanical Euphoric Misanthropia, but played in a way more furious and intense manner. Like, this is some seriously heavy sounding modern black metal. The production, particularly in the drums, there's double kicks in here that are just insanely fast. Absolutely crazy. It's got that very Season of Mist production to it. Still has some of the electronic components that remained from that sort of early 2000s era. But importantly, the key And Oceans sound, which is their use of keyboards on the twinkly side of keyboards, that's still here, going back to the first couple of albums, which has always been a bit like Tartaros, that very twinkly sound of keyboards, not so much just big chords or anything, there's lots of just little twinkly bits. Always been a key thing with And Oceans in their early days, at least. And some of it, really does harken back to their first album, Dynamic Gallery of Thoughts. The tempo on here kind of changes up quite a bit, goes to that feels fast but is actually mid-paced Dimmu Borgir speed, particularly on those albums I just mentioned. There's a track in here called Inverse Magnification Matrix. That's probably the closest to that Dimmu Borgir sound from the early 2000s. And look, if you're not a fan of Dimmu Borgir, don't be put off by all the comparisons that I've just been giving. I mean it when I say that these guys are more intense. They are significantly more angry and heavier than either of those 2 albums. That said, if you're only into very raw black metal, this is not the album for you. It is very polished. It is very clean. The drums are obviously, very well produced, triggered, I suppose. Don't know enough about those things to talk about them, but it is incredibly clean production on this, so you're not getting your necro black metal here. Out of all the tracks on here, the 5th one is the one I can't pronounce because that's the one that's all in Finnish. Everything else is sung in English. That track is all in Finnish. The 6th track is called Cloud Heads. That one is probably the most closest to the Am God sound, the third album from And Oceans. Some of the vocal effects and those electronics definitely taking a little bit more focus in that track. But it's also at the same time the most far away from that album, as it's got the most destructive intensity of any of the tracks on this album. I really cannot overstate how heavy this thing can get. The production in this really assists it in just hitting crazy speeds, massive dynamics. It is just crushing for a black metal album, which is, I don't usually say crushing in black metal, but here we are. There's a track on here called Wine into Water, very bright sounding track, has melodic trem riff that opens it and stays throughout, leading to some more chuggy riffs. It's a mix of melody and chug, like the chuggiest stuff that is on this album. The midsection of that track sort of pauses for a bit of an electronic passage, and then it returns to the riffs. I could really see that track, if there was such a thing as being a radio single. I could see it as being the radio single. Here's the booklet here. It's all the lyrics and things. Got a bit of a isometric 3D kind of video game look going on there, which is interesting. So look, I don't want to again scare you from saying that this is commercial sounding, because I don't think it is. It's just a talented act that have produced a very well balanced modern black metal album with crisp production, and it just needs to be played loud. So really, really good stuff. I'm enjoying it more than the previous album, which I enjoyed quite a lot, but yeah, this one here, this one is doing it more for me. So there you go, the new one from And Oceans. And that's the update. That's 6 albums I'm going to be showing you today. Hope you all enjoyed. There should be a fairly significantly large black metal vinyl update coming up at some point this month, so look out for that one. And yeah, thanks for watching. Check out this guy. Check out this guy. I'll see you next time.